Welcome to the Purpose Driven Mom Show, episode 395. And today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is time blocking. Now, I've done a lot of episodes on time blocking before, but I'm going to talk to you today about the mistakes that I think you're making with trying to do your time blocking. I have a lot of my students who will come to me and say the way that you teach time blocking is just a smidge different from other people, and it makes it click in their brain. So what I'm hoping today is that if you've tried time blocking before and it hasn't stuck, you're going to hear me say something that clicks and that aha moment comes for you, where you are able to use time blocking now super efficiently. We're going to have all the show notes over at purposedrivenmom.com/podcast 395. So go and check them out if anything I say today or anything that's linked up sparks interest to you. So let's start with the big one. What actually is time blocking, and how could you possibly be doing it wrong? Now, time blocking is the concept of chunking out your day into small time blocks, right? Small chunks of time. And a lot of people get that. A lot of people understand, okay, like I have a chunk from, my kids are in school from 9 to 3, so that's block one. This is where our first mistake comes in. I notice that one of the mistakes that many of the moms that I work with are making when it comes to time blocking is they're making their blocks too big or too small. So let me tell you what I mean. I highly recommend when you're blocking out your time, you make them 3 to 4 hours. That is like the sweet spot. If you're doing anything less than 3 hours, what happens is they get small and you get stuck into hourly planning. Now, I don't mind hourly planning. It worked great for me as a teacher. But right now, with what I'm trying to achieve as a work-at-home mom, time blocking is the best because it gives me flexibility of what order I do things in, but urgency, okay? And the reason that it works is instead of saying by the end of the day, I'm going to get something done, right? That's too broad. You're saying by the end of the block of time I've assigned, I'm going to get something done. So that's kind of the little bit of urgency. Like I've got to do it by the end of this time. But the thing is, when we have hourly schedulers, we're too tight on our time. And so if we get off by even 10, 15 minutes, our brain struggles to know what to do. So if you're making your time blocks too small, 1 hour, 2 hour, it's going to be so small that the second you get thrown off, you're not going to know how to get it back together. But what happens when we make it too big? When we're making our time blocks just a little bit too big, the thing that will start to happen is that we will have too much flexibility, right? So we need this middle ground. This is why, if you ever have a weekend off, which I can't even remember last weekend I had off. So maybe say like a whole day, like I have all Saturday off. We have no plans. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to catch up on my laundry and do all the chores around the house and all these things. We're going to procrastinate and we're going to wait and we're going to wait. And then all of a sudden it's Saturday night. Nothing has gotten done. Why? Because we didn't have enough urgency. So you're going to want to create these blocks that are a mix of a tight enough timeline, but not too tight and not so loose. Okay. 3 to 4 hours is going to be it. The other mistake that I noticed people making with time blocking, and this was a big one for a lot of the moms that I work with, is that they're making every single time block the same. I don't know about you. My life isn't the same every single day. My days aren't the same. I have a lot of moms that come work with me that have shift work, or maybe their partner travels for work, or they're homeschooling and they have like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. When you're creating time blocks, you want to make sure that you're doing them so that each day looks a little different. Now, I have typical time blocks. I teach a concept of 3 different time blocks: ideal, in progress, and when the poop hits the fan, right? And I have a typical Monday through Friday, but it's not always the same. There are also days when my kids are off. My kids don't have activities, things like that. So when you're creating your time blocks, I highly encourage you to look at each day a little bit differently and ask yourself, what does my typical Monday look like? All right, if a Monday is typical, then I can make a typical Monday time block. What's my typical Thursday? What's my typical weekend? This will allow you to kind of look at it and say, all right, I'm not making everything look exactly the same. I'm giving myself some freedom because I can't always make it fit. My weekends do not look like my weekdays, and I don't want them to. I teach, the concept of the 4 seasons: plan, push, rest, and fun. I try to kind of put them throughout, but I want to make sure that while I still have some routines, they're not always the same. My rest days don't look like my push days on purpose. So when I'm crafting time blocks, I want to make sure that I'm working on them, one, in advance. I'm not going to touch on this as a mistake, but I always like to plan out my time blocks for the month before the month starts. And I make a few of those. Like I mentioned, that when the poop hits the fan, like in February, for example, I'm recording this in January, but in February, when this is going live, My kids have, I think, 3 different days off of school. So I need to make sure that I'm pre-planning time blocks around that, around what my day looks like, not what I wish it was, because we don't always have that flexibility of what we wish it was. It's just kind of where we're at. All right. So mistake 1, too big, too small time blocks. Mistake 2, trying to make them all the same. Mistake number 3 is not pre-assigning themes to your time blocks. Now, this is the thing that I love the most about the way I teach time blocking. People can understand the concept, I think, pretty easily of creating a time block. But what happens when you get back into the scheduling like we do as moms, where you say, all right, let me get everything in for everyone else. Eventually, I'll put my goals in. We feel resentful. We feel burnt out. It doesn't work. I want to encourage you to use the concept of theming. Theming time blocks is essentially saying, this is where this specific goal is going to go. It's not saying this is the only thing I'm doing, but it's saying this is where this goal goes. So I have some examples I'm going to give you of themes. All right. My morning blocks tend to be, not every day, tend to be self-care blocks. All right. So if I have any self-care related goals, I'm starting some meditation, I work out in the morning, I go for some runs, I take a shower, like all those things I do for me, I read a little bit of a book. This allows me to say, these are the goals I have. I want to work out. I want to read my book, do my meditation. Where do I want to put them in my schedule? I'm going to put them in my self-care block. So the way I like to do this is I like to make my goals for the month. So I want you to look right now. This is airing at the end of February. So look at March goals and ask yourself, if these are my goals for the month, then I need to make sure I have a themed block at least once a week to fit them in. Now, depending on the intensity of the goal, right? I teach a tiering system. If they're a tier 1, if they're like high focus area for you, you're going to want multiple themes, but you don't have to have it the same every day. So I want to give you an example of a theme I have, which is my home block. All right. I do not have a home block every single day. I have a home block about 3 times a week. What do I do in my home block? Any of my home related goals. This is where some of my thought catcher tasks go, little things to do around the house. This is where my decluttering, I have a 12-week decluttering goal. I will do my decluttering, things like that. I don't have this every day because it's not a goal that I need to work on every day. Actually, it's not even a 12-week. I have like a year-long decluttering goal I'm working on. I got it all year. It's going to take some time. So I'm not in a sprint for this goal. If I was in a sprint for this goal, then I want to make sure that I had 5 to 6 time blocks a week to work on it. But I don't need that. I can get what I need to get done in 3 time blocks a week. And what that leaves me with is 4 time blocks that aren't home. So from 3 to 6, that's my home block. 3 times a week. Well, those other 4 times, it could be something else. Once a week, it's what I call thought catchers. And that's when I run errands and make phone calls, right? Another time a week, it's called buffer time. And buffer time is when I catch up on all the stuff I forgot to do or the stuff that didn't get done in time. This allows me to know where my goals are going to go. So think through your goals for the next month and ask yourself, do I have a theme to work on them? When you don't theme out your blocks, you're not really time blocking, you're just marking off in your calendar different chunks of time. It's just saying, oh, this is 9 to 12. I guess I'll do something. Instead of this is 9 to 12. This is when I'm going to record my podcast. This is my podcast theme. So I will go through my work tasks. I will make my categorized list and I will say, okay, for example, right now we're gearing up for our summit. It's coming in April. We've got to really ramp up. In January and February, I have 1 time block a week on Summit because I don't have as many Summit tasks to complete, right? I have Summit things that have to get done. I can get them done in my 3-hour block. But in March and April, I might have 2, sometimes 3, some weeks 4 time blocks each week themed Summit because I have more Summit tasks I have to complete. So make sure not only that you theme things, but make sure that your themes align with the intensity of your goal. All right, so number 1, too big, too small. Check if you're doing that. Number 2, trying to make every day the same. And number 3 is not creating intentional themes around your goals. Number 4 is that you're putting too many things in your time block. And I know this is the hardest. We have all these things we want to do, right? Cara, I have this huge list that has to get done. And I feel you, I understand you. But you putting too many things in your time blocks is going to set you up for failure because it's going to make you feel like a failure. It's going to make you feel like you're not doing enough, that you're not good enough, and it's not going to set you up for success. So here is my recommendation, okay? There's 2 different ways you can do this. Normally, I like the easy math by minutes. I will take however long my time block is, say it's 3 hours. I will divide it by 2, which is 90 minutes, and I will only assign 90 minutes worth of tasks into that block. Why? Because if I assigned 3 hours of tasks in a 3-hour block, I'm setting myself up for failure. Something's going to take longer. Something else is going to pop up, right? I'm going to move at a different pace. I'm a human being. But if I assign 90 minutes worth of tasks in a 3-hour block, I've got a significant amount of buffer to be a human being, right? To do something else, to get derailed for a phone call that's supposed to take 10 minutes to take 25. I give myself enough buffer time. So one of the things I recommend is you can work on, I'm going to map out my time blocks and I'm going to fill my time blocks with things that fit my theme, right? It's not the only thing that happens. I mentioned that. Don't forget, just because this is my, let's say we have a time block around in work, I have a social media time block. Doesn't mean that the only thing I'm working on is social media. Social media doesn't take me that long to do once a week. So I might have a 3-hour time block. I might work on social media for an hour and then I use their other time to do more things. It just, remember, it says that's where this is going to go, but I can do it by that. The other thing I like to do is pick a micro 3. Now, you maybe have heard the concept, the big 3, right? I'm going to pick 3 priorities to work on that day. And I like this concept, except as a busy mom who's growing a business, I have more things I have to get done. And so if I just say I'm only going to work on these 3 priorities, what happens to everything else? What happens to those things that need to get completed? Instead, I like to make a micro 3 priority for each time block of my day. And I want to push the word micro. This is not where I am going to do a 4-hour task inside each time block. This is where I'm going to pick 3 things per time block that, again, fit into that block time-wise. So maybe one task is 15 minutes, maybe one task is an hour, and maybe one task is 30 minutes. Again, I still have buffer, but I'm going to go ahead and pick 3 priorities per time block. This allows me to toggle between my mom, my work-at-home mom, my home CEO hat. This allows me to get multiple things done and say, hey, this is my home time block. The 3 things I'm doing is my decluttering task, laundry, and prepping dinner, right? I don't cook dinner fresh every night. I cook 3 times a week. So it works great. I only cook during my home blocks. When I don't have a home block scheduled, obviously we eat dinner, but I'm not making a full meal. We eat leftovers and things like that. And this gives me less pressure, but it also gives me focus. I know that during that home block, I know exactly which 3 things I'm going to do. They're going to take me not a ton of time. I like to use 15 minutes or less, but obviously some things take a little bit longer and I'm intentional. And then when that time block is done, I can start over. And here's the thing I like about that is, okay, my home time block is done. I got my 3 tasks done. I got done early. I can go read my book or do something else for my task list. And now I'm going to toggle into my next time block. And now I know that it is ideal to have extended hours on one task. But I have 3 kids. I volunteer a lot. I run a business. I don't have extended hours to work on one task. So if I can at least say, all right, this is my 3-hour work time block. These are my 3 micro things. I'm going to work on those. And now I'm going to switch gears and put on, a new hat and go into a new role. My brain can handle that better. The key here, though, I'm going to add like a 5-point A here, is you have to make sure you're planning micro. Make sure the tasks that you're planning fit time-wise into that block. They are a small one thing task per project. So if I had a podcast time block, for example, I'm not putting on there the record 3 episodes. I might put outline this episode, right? And then maybe I outline next week's episode and record 2 episodes that I've already outlined, right? Maybe I outline all 3 episodes, maybe, things like that. I'm not putting all of it on there because it often is more than I've given myself time for. Final little bonus mistake. I was talking to Jamie on my team today, and she asked me this question, so I thought, let's talk about it. And it's switching gears, right? I mentioned we got to go from this hat to this hat. Well, how do you do that? And the other mistake 6, right? Bonus mistake here is you're not adding transition time into your time blocks. And at first, when she asked me this today, I was like, I don't know if I had advice for you. Like, let me think about it. And now I realize I do. So Jamie, I'll let you know that you can go listen to this early if you want. It's transition time. Transition time is essentially the concept. Remember when you were in high school and the bell would ring and you would have 4 minutes to get from one side of the building to the other, which is not an adequate amount of time, but it's what we gave the kids. Talk about starting anxiety early, right? Rush to class, get to your locker, go to the bathroom. Again, now that I think about it, I'm like, that is wild to me that that's all the time we give kids to do things. But that's a story for another day. I think that concept, though, is very good to use inside of transition time in your home. Instead of saying, okay, it's 12 o'clock, this time block is over, I'm immediately going to this activity. I'm going from picking my kids up or dropping them at school, right? So my time blocks are about 6 to 9 a.m. Drop my kids at school around 8:45 to 9, and then 9 o'clock work starts. But I found myself struggling because I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to start right into work. Or I pick my kids up at 3:30, and then I'm supposed to go right back into home stuff when I'm just coming off work. So what I think might be a problem that you might be facing also is not having transition time. I like to pick a transition activity inside and after each block. This allows me to reset my expectations, reset my time, reset all the things I need to do. So what can you do for transition activities? Here's a couple really good ideas. Natural, like bio things, like I have to go to the bathroom, right? So if I am resetting between my podcast time block and my social media time block, right? I'm still home, I'm not really going anywhere. I might take a break, go to the bathroom, reset, check my phone, like take a break. Like if I was at a traditional job, I will take a 15-minute break for myself, right? It's a super simple one. Eating, like I gotta go eat lunch, I'm gonna go have a snack. Sitting with my cup of coffee, and this is something I've pushed myself to do, taking my cup of coffee, taking my lunch, and not sitting in my office. Going to take a lunch break, like if I was at a traditional job, taking a coffee break if I was at a traditional job. I don't know actually if they'd give you that, but like when I was a teacher, I had to prep, right? I had some break. When we're home, I often find, especially because I used to be of the mindset of, well, I'm my kids, especially when I was paying for preschool, I'm paying for my kids to go to school. Like I have to maximize every minute. And that led me to feeling really burnt out. So one of the things I'm doing this year is taking more time off. So go have that cup of coffee. You could also create a transition that allows you to feel better to go into that block. So one of the things I like to do between my work transition and my home transition is either like a 5-minute meditation or the legs up on the wall where you sit and you put your like tush up against the wall. So you're in like a 90-degree angle and your feet up on the wall. And I just sit. I read somewhere, I have no science, I have nothing to back it right now. I heard somebody else talk about it on a podcast, how it's good for anxiety and resetting your brain. So I like to sometimes just put legs up on the wall and I sit there and I take a couple breaths. Sometimes I'll just sit in silence, right? Especially though, when it's that time block between work and my kids. I like to stop work at a certain time. I stop work at 3. I leave at 3:25 to walk. I pick up my kids. We're walkers, so I'll walk and I pick up my kids at 3:35. From 3 to 3:25, that is my transition block where I will kind of close up shop at work. It's not working on new things. I literally will reset my desk, check my work list for the day, and then I give myself 5 to 10 minutes where I just sit, sometimes in silence. Sometimes I scroll my phone. Sometimes I just go, and stare outside. But I give myself some time to mentally reset so that I'm not rushing from work into home. Now, if you have a drive, if you have a commute from work to home, that's when I would recommend you use that transition time to listen to a good podcast. If I'm thinking about Jamie's example, because we were just talking about this morning, she drops her kids off at school and comes home, right? And her example was actually the other way around, struggling to go from work to home. But I'm going to use this example here. I know she drives. It's not a long drive, right? But she's got to come home. Use that time to put on a podcast, to put on some positive music, to get something to get your brain switching from gear to gear. Transition yourself into this activity. This allows you to better jump into your time block. But Cara, if I have a transition, then my time block times aren't perfect. Well, no way. Of course not. They're not going to be perfect. If my time block, again, my time blocks are 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and then I do have a little one that breaks the rules. It's 9 to 11, but that's my downtime, and I don't really plan anything then. So if I was to say, okay, my block ends at 3 and immediately starts at 3, and I had no transition time, I think I'd feel really grumpy. So I don't leave till 3:25. I just let it overlap, and I use that transition time to get myself together before I pick up the kids. I highly recommend it, especially if you're working from home. And if your kids are home, I think about my daughter had a stomach bug this week, so she was home from school, and I still had to go work in the office. I needed to like sit for a couple minutes in my office before I left my office to go check on her, because I just needed a second. Because when we're constantly being demanded on, right? When it's constantly mom, work, in charge, that's when our brain goes into fight or flight. So we need to give ourselves some time to do some intentional breathings, meditate, journal, whatever it is, gratitude, those types of things help. I want to encourage you this week to think about time blocks. And if you're not sure where to get started on time blocking, do a time audit. go through your week and just write it all down. What are you doing? When are you doing it? This is going to allow you to make your batches for the next month. It's going to allow you to say like, hey, I noticed I'm doing errands a couple times a week. Maybe I could just make one errands block and things like that. I think this is really going to help you having intentionality in your day, but grace, because again, the concept of time blocking is not that everything's got to get done by the end of the day. It's saying, hey, from 12 to 9 to 12, these are the 3 tasks I want to get done. I have flexibility. Now, this is key. Flexibility of the order I do things. And I always share this story because my kids, we have time blocks in the mornings, and I taught them our morning routine. And I used to get really frustrated because in my brain, I want my kids to eat their breakfast, brush their teeth, and get dressed in that order. So they don't have toothpaste all over their shirt, right? Things like that. But my kids weren't doing that. They were doing things in a different order. And it was annoying me until I reminded myself that really it's about the end goal. And the end goal is that they complete the tasks by the end of the time block. I don't care what order it's done. Really, if I back up and I ask myself, does it matter? In the grand scheme of things, if my kids are brushing their teeth, having breakfast, and getting dressed without me having to nag, I do not care, right? And what this allows us to do is allows us to be flexible within our block. So maybe this is another bonus mistake, but if you're not giving yourself flexibility within your block, you're probably frustrated. And the reason flexibility within your block helps is because if I say my morning routine is I'm going to meditate, I'm going to journal, I'm going to work out. Okay, those are my 3 self-care tasks. If I get to meditation and I'm like, oh my gosh, like kicking and screaming, I don't want to do it, it will take me forever. Like I will whine and I will complain. If instead I just said, why don't I just do something else first and get the momentum going? So don't feel like you have to be locked in. Just because these are your micro 3 and the ideal order for you does not mean it's your in progress order. Does not mean it's your must do written in pen order. Okay. If you have your 3 tasks for your time block, I don't care what order you do them in. The goal is just that they're completed by the end of that block. I want to encourage you to start time blocking this week. If you have questions, I'm at a purpose-driven mom on Instagram. You can send us an email at our new email address, Cara@caraharvey.com. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, come hang with us over on our YouTube channel. If you're not on YouTube yet, you can watch the videos of us recording these episodes, and have a great rest of your day. Show notes are over at a purpose-drivenmom.com/podcast 395, almost at episode 400, which is amazing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Have a great rest of your day.